We've all been there, lying in bed at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, and feeling like our heart is trying to run a marathon while our body is glued to the mattress. You tell yourself to just relax. You tell yourself that the workday is over, the argument is finished, or the bill is paid. But your body isn't listening. It's like there's a hum under your skin, a low-voltage electricity that won't shut off. We've been taught to treat this as a mindset problem, something we can think our way out of. But the truth is much heavier. It's not just in your head. It's a physical echo of everything you've had to survive. Think about the silence of a house at that hour. It's supposed to be the time when the world lets you go. But instead, it feels like the volume of your own internal world has been turned up to a deafening level. You feel every tick of the clock, every minor ache in your joints, and the relentless pressure behind your eyes. You try all the tricks, counting backward, focusing on your breathing, but your nervous system is convinced that the war is still raging. It's a lonely kind of exhaustion. It's the exhaustion of being a sentry on a watchtower when everyone else has gone to sleep, guarding against a shadow you can't quite define but can certainly feel. This weight isn't just about being tired. It's about the heavy, invisible cloak of readiness that you've forgotten how to take off. You might feel it as a tightness in your chest that makes a full breath feel impossible, or a restlessness in your legs that makes stillness feel like a threat. We live in a world that asks us to keep going, to keep producing, to keep appearing fine. But your body is the one keeping the real score. It remembers the times you had to bite your tongue to stay safe. It remembers the years you spent waiting for the other shoe to drop. It remembers the moments when your boundaries were crossed and you had nowhere to go. When you stay up like this, you aren't just overthinking. You are experiencing a body that is still trying to solve a problem from 5 years ago, or 5 days ago, or even 5 minutes ago. Your brain is scanning the horizon for danger because that is what it was trained to do. We often judge ourselves for this. We think, why can't I just be normal? Why am I so wired? But that judgment only adds more weight to the pile. It creates a secondary layer of stress, the stress of being stressed. Imagine, instead, if we looked at that late-night wakefulness with a bit of compassion. Imagine if we acknowledged that our racing heart is actually a very loyal, very tired soldier that doesn't know the treaty has been signed. The weight of staying up is the weight of carrying a survival strategy into a time of peace. It is the physical manifestation of a system that has been pushed past its limit and has lost the map back to calm. You aren't failing at relaxing. Your body is simply trying to make sure you're still here tomorrow. It's an exhausting way to live, always braced for impact, even when you're tucked under a blanket in a locked house. This script, this journey we are on together, is about learning how to gently tell that internal soldier that they can finally step down. It's about understanding that the buzzing in your nerves is not a flaw in your character, but a testimony to how much you've endured. We carry this weight because we had to, but we don't have to carry it forever. The first step toward putting it down is recognizing that it's there, not as an enemy, but as a part of you that is desperately asking for a chance to finally, truly rest. Think about a time you felt truly overwhelmed. Maybe it was a period of months where the pressure never let up, or a single moment where the floor felt like it dropped out from under you. Even after the situation passed, did you notice how you kept bracing for the next hit? Your shoulders stayed hiked up toward your ears. Your breath stayed shallow, barely reaching your chest. Carl Jung once said, "The body is the living shape of life." It means our experiences don't just vanish once they're over. They find a home in our muscles and our nerves. We become a library of every high alert moment we've ever had, filed away in the way we hold our posture or clench our jaw. It's a strange thing to realize that your skin, your bones, and your connective tissue are better historians than your conscious mind. You might forget the exact words of a hurtful conversation from a decade ago, but your stomach remembers the way it knotted up during that silence. Your mind might tell you that you're safe now, that you've moved on and changed your life, but your nervous system is still holding the archived version of that old fear. It's written in the way you jump when someone says your name unexpectedly, or the way you can't seem to sit with your back to a door in a crowded room. These aren't just habits. They are volumes on the shelves of your body's silent library. When we experience something that overwhelms our ability to cope, that energy doesn't just evaporate. It gets stored in the basement of our biology. We carry it in the chronic tension of our neck, a physical manifestation of a burden we were never meant to carry alone. We carry it in the way our hands might shake when we try to speak up for ourselves, a physical record of every time we were silenced in the past. This library is filled with the stories of things we couldn't say, movements we couldn't make, and tears we didn't have the time or safety to cry. It's a heavy collection, and we've been lugging it around for years without even realizing that it's what is making us so tired. Think of the way you hold your phone or drive your car. Are your knuckles white? Is your tongue pressed against the roof of your mouth? That is the library speaking. It's a language of bracing. We brace against the world because our history has taught us that the world is unpredictable. We become experts at the lean, that internal leaning forward into the next task, the next crisis, the next demand, never quite allowing ourselves to settle back into our own frame. We are living in a state of constant preparation for a disaster that has already happened. Carl Jung's insight that the body is the living shape of life suggests that we are not just walking brains. We are integrated beings where every emotional bruise leaves a physical mark. This isn't meant to sound heavy or hopeless. In fact, it's quite the opposite. If the body is a library that has documented our struggles, it is also a library that can store the stories of our healing. But first, we have to acknowledge the archives. We have to stop looking at our physical symptoms as annoyances or failings, and start seeing them as the body's honest attempt to tell its story. When you feel that familiar tightness in your throat, or that sudden coldness in your limbs, try to listen to it. Instead of trying to fix it or suppress it with logic, just acknowledge that a certain book has been pulled off the shelf. Your body is remembering. It's telling you that it still feels the echoes of a time when it had to be strong, when it had to be fast, or when it had to be invisible. By recognizing these physical sensations as part of your history, you begin the slow process of updating the records. You start to show your nervous system that the library doesn't just have to be a collection of past tragedies. It can also be a place where new, softer stories are written. Every time you consciously drop your shoulders or take a deep, grounding breath, you are adding a new chapter, one where you are finally, safely present. When we talk about the nervous system, we're talking about your internal security team. Its only job is to keep you safe. But sometimes that security team gets stuck in the on position. Have you ever dropped a spoon in a quiet kitchen and felt a surge of genuine panic, like you were in actual danger? That's not an overreaction. It's a system that has forgotten how to feel a sense of normal. When stress becomes chronic, our internal alarm starts going off at the slightest breeze. We aren't sensitive or weak. We are simply operating on a system that is trying too hard to protect us from a threat that isn't there anymore. Imagine living in a house where the smoke detector is so sensitive that it goes off every time you try to make toast. At first, you jump. You check the stove, you check the outlets, you look for the fire. But after the 100th time, you don't look for fire anymore. You just live with the piercing noise. You start to feel a permanent sense of dread, waiting for that next shrill beep. This is what it feels like to live with a dysregulated nervous system. Your brain is scanning every facial expression, every tone of voice, and every sudden movement for a sign of trouble. You aren't being dramatic. Your internal wiring is genuinely convinced that the house is on fire, even when you're just trying to have a quiet dinner. This invisible alarm system doesn't just affect your mind. It changes the way your blood flows and the way your muscles react. It keeps you in a state of high alert readiness, a biological posture of fight or flight that was only ever meant to last for a few minutes. But for many of us, it has lasted for years. We carry this buzzing energy in our chests, a feeling of being vibrationally loud, even when we are sitting perfectly still. You might find yourself snapping at the people you love over something small, not because you're a mean person, but because your alarm system is currently shouting so loudly that you can't hear anything else. You are simply reacting to the danger your body insists is right around the corner. Think about how exhausting it is to never truly feel at ease. It's the feeling of being tired but wired. You crave rest more than anything in the world. But when you finally get the chance to sit down, your body won't let you settle. The alarm is still humming. It tells you that you've forgotten something important, or that someone is mad at you, or that something terrible is about to happen. This is the hallmark of a system that has lost its off switch. It has been through so much that it has decided that calm is actually a dangerous state to be in. To your nervous system, being relaxed feels like having your guard down, and having your guard down feels like a death sentence. The tragedy of the invisible alarm is that it often keeps us from the very peace we are trying to build. We work hard to create a safe life, a stable job, a comfortable home, good relationships, but we can't actually enjoy them because our internal security team is still patrolling the perimeter with flashlights and sirens. We feel like a fraud in our own peace. We think, I should be happy now, so why am I still so tense? Understanding this system is the first step toward turning the volume down. You have to realize that this alarm isn't a broken part of you. It's a highly efficient survival tool that just hasn't received the memo that the war is over. It's trying to save your life, even if its methods are making it hard to live that life. Healing isn't about ripping the alarm out of the wall. It's about gently, consistently showing your internal security team that the perimeter is secure. It's about building a new kind of trust with your own biology, moving from a state of constant emergency to a state of gradual, hard-earned safety. You aren't broken for feeling this way. You are just very, very well protected. Now, we just have to learn how to let that protection rest. There is a specific kind of frustration that comes when people tell you to just let it go. It feels like being told to stop a sneeze midway through. You can't simply decide to not be stressed when your biology is convinced you're in the middle of a crisis. This is where we often turn on ourselves, getting angry at our own exhaustion or our inability to focus. But you cannot shame yourself into healing. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't yell at it for not being able to run. Your nervous system is no different. It needs recognition, not a lecture. It needs to know that the crisis is actually over, not just that you want it to be over. We live in a culture that treats the human heart like a computer, as if we can just find the corrupted file of a bad memory, hit delete, and empty the trash. But the body doesn't have a delete button. When someone tells you to move on, they are often speaking to your intellect, but they are ignoring your skin, your breath, and your pulse. You might intellectually understand that a situation ended 3 years ago. But if your heart rate still spikes when you hear a certain tone of voice, you haven't failed at moving on. It just means your body is still holding a protective boundary that it's not yet ready to lower. Think about the sheer amount of energy it takes to just get over it. It's an act of suppression. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a while, but your muscles will eventually fatigue, and the ball will come crashing back to the surface with even more force. When we force ourselves to get over things before our nervous system feels safe, we aren't healing. We are just burying the tension deeper into our tissues. We become functionally numb, walking through our days like ghosts, wondering why we feel so disconnected from the beauty around us. We are so busy holding the ball underwater that we have no energy left to actually swim. there is a profound loneliness in this myth. It makes us feel like we are falling behind in some invisible race of emotional maturity. We see others appearing to breeze through life, and we wonder why we are still stuck on that one comment, that one loss, or that one season of life that broke us. But stuck is the wrong word. You aren't stuck. You are processing. You are integrating. Some things are too big to be gotten over. They can only be gone through. They are the heavy stones we carry until, eventually, we learn how to set them down one by one, not because someone told us to, but because our hands finally feel safe enough to let go. Carl Jung once remarked, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." But that choice isn't a single, heroic moment of willpower. It is 1,000 tiny, quiet choices to be kind to yourself when you're struggling. It's the choice to say, "I'm having a hard time today, and that's okay," instead of, "I should be over this by now." The myth of just getting over it is a thief. It steals your patience and replaces it with a ticking clock. It makes you feel like your healing has an expiration date. But healing is more like the changing of seasons than the flipping of a light switch. You can't rush the winter to become spring. You have to let the ground rest. You have to let the frost do its work. To truly heal the nervous system, we have to stop treating our feelings like obstacles to be cleared and start treating them like guests who have a message to deliver. When we stop fighting the fact that we are still affected by our past, the irony is that the weight finally begins to lighten. We find that the more we allow ourselves to not be over it, the more room we actually create for the over it to happen naturally, in its own time and on its own terms. You aren't behind. You are exactly where your body needs to be to survive, and eventually, to thrive. Healing begins when we stop trying to drown out the noise and start actually listening to the static. Think of that tightness in your chest or that jittery feeling in your hands as a signal. It's your body's way of saying, "I'm still holding on to something." As Jung noted, everything that is irritated about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This applies to our internal world, too. The things that irritate us about our own reactions, the sudden irritability, the brain fog, the need to withdraw, are actually doorways. They are clues. Instead of pushing the feeling away, we have to learn to sit with it, acknowledging that the static has a reason for being there. When we feel that internal buzz, our first instinct is usually to distract ourselves. We pick up our phones, we turn on the television, we find a task to complete. Anything to avoid the uncomfortable hum of our own presence. We treat the static like a broken radio station, a nuisance that needs to be silenced. But that static is actually the sound of your nervous system trying to communicate in a language you haven't learned yet. It's the sound of unshed tears, unvoiced boundaries, and the raw energy of self-preservation. When you ignore it, the volume only gets louder. It turns into a headache, a backache, or a sudden burst of anger over a dropped plate. Imagine for a moment that the static isn't a problem to be solved, but a person to be heard. If a friend came to you, shaking and unable to speak clearly, you wouldn't tell them to be quiet or fix their signal. You would sit with them. You would offer them a hand. You would wait patiently for them to find their words. We rarely offer that same grace to ourselves. Listening to the static means staying in the room with yourself when things get uncomfortable. It means saying, "I feel this vibration in my stomach. And even though I don't know exactly what it wants, I'm not going to run away from it today." This is a deeply emotional process because underneath the static, there is often a lot of stood grief. We spend so much of our lives being fine and capable that we lose touch with the parts of us that were hurt. The static is the protective layer that kept that hurt at a distance so we could keep functioning. When we finally start to listen, we might feel a sudden wave of sadness or a localized heat in our muscles. That isn't a sign that you're getting worse. It's a sign that the signal is finally getting through. The white noise of your stress is starting to take shape, turning into a story you can finally begin to process. Think of those moments when you feel off for no apparent reason. You have a roof over your head, food in the fridge, and yet there is that persistent, grainy feeling in your mind. Instead of fighting it, try to describe it. Is the static heavy? Is it sharp? Does it have a rhythm? When we give the static a shape, we take away its power to overwhelm us. We move from being victims of our nerves to being observers of our experience. This shift is subtle, but it is the foundation of all nervous system healing. You are creating a safe container for your own discomfort. Listening to the static requires a profound level of honesty. It means admitting that even though we look okay on the outside, our internal world is still navigating a storm. It's an acknowledgement that our living shape, as Jung called it, is currently vibrating with the frequency of past survival. But there is a beautiful relief that comes when we stop the war against our own sensations. The more we listen without judgment, the more the static begins to settle. It's as if the nervous system finally feels seen. It realizes it doesn't have to scream to get your attention anymore. In the quiet that follows, you don't just find silence. You find a clearer version of yourself, one that is no longer obscured by the noise of simply trying to survive. Have you ever noticed how after a close call while driving, you might find your hands shaking on the steering wheel? That shaking is actually a gift. It's the body trying to discharge the massive amount of energy it just geared up to use. But in our daily lives, we've learned to suppress that. We sit through stressful meetings. We swallow our words during tense conversations. And we stay perfectly still while our insides are screaming. We build up a suit of armor made of tension. Learning to shake it off isn't just a metaphor. It's about finding physical ways to let that energy out, whether through movement, a long exhale, or simply allowing yourself to tremble when the adrenaline hits. armor is a brilliant invention. It protects the soft, vulnerable parts of us from being pierced by the world. When we go through seasons of trauma or prolonged stress, we weld this armor onto our skin. We tighten our pelvic floor, we lock our knees, and we pull our rib cage tight. We do this so we don't feel the full impact of the blows life is throwing. But the tragedy of armor is that it doesn't just keep out the pain. It keeps out the connection, the joy, and the oxygen. After a while, the armor becomes so heavy that we forget there is a soft, living person underneath it. We start to think we are the iron. We start to think that being tough and unshakable is the only way to be. Think about how much effort it takes to keep your body that rigid. It's a full-time job. You are spending your life's currency, your energy, your sleep, your vitality, to maintain a defensive wall that was only supposed to be temporary. When we talk about shaking it off, we are talking about the terrifying and beautiful act of letting the plates of that armor fall. It's the moment you allow your shoulders to actually drop an inch, and you realize how much they were hurting. It's the moment you let a sigh go all the way to the bottom of your lungs, even if it ends in a sob. That sob isn't a sign of weakness. It's the sound of the metal finally cracking so the person inside can breathe. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of recognizing the different parts of ourselves, and our armor is a part of us that deserves our gratitude. It kept us safe when we were at our most vulnerable. But there comes a time when the armor is no longer a shield. It is a cage. Shaking it off requires us to trust that we can survive without the constant tension. It feels counterintuitive. Your body will tell you that if you let go of the clench in your jaw, you might fall apart. But the truth is, you won't fall apart. You will finally begin to flow. You will move from being a solid, brittle object to being a fluid, living being again. The next time you feel that surge of too much energy, that restless, vibrating feeling that makes you want to crawl out of your skin, try to lean into the movement. Let your hands shake, bounce on your heels, wring a towel. Give the energy a place to go. When we deny the body its need to move through the stress, we trap the trauma in our fibers. By allowing the shake, we are telling our nervous system, the threat is over. You don't have to hold this anymore. You can let the energy move through you and out into the world. It takes immense courage to be soft in a world that feels hard. It takes courage to admit that the armor is exhausting you. But there is a lightness on the other side of that heaviness that you haven't felt in a very long time. As the plates of your defense fall away, you might feel a bit cold or exposed at first. That's okay. That's just what it feels like to be alive again. You are reclaiming the freedom to be flexible, to be responsive, and to be present. You are trading the safety of a statue for the vitality of a human being. You are finally, piece by piece, shaking off the weight of what you had to be, so you can discover who you actually are. We often wait for the world to become peaceful before we allow ourselves to feel calm. But life doesn't work that way. We have to build an architecture of safety within ourselves. This looks like the small things, the way you sit in a chair and actually let the chair hold your weight, or the way you take 30 seconds to feel the ground under your feet. It's about teaching your nerves that in this specific second, you are okay. You aren't rebuilding your entire life in one day. You're just convincing your body that the immediate room you're standing in is safe. It's a slow, repetitive process of coming back to the present. Safety isn't a grand palace we build all at once. It is a structure made of tiny, seemingly insignificant moments of relief. Think about the way you usually move through your home. Are you rushing even when there's no deadline? Are you holding your breath while you wait for the kettle to boil? That is living in an architecture of emergency. To change that, we have to start laying different bricks. It starts with the realization that your body hasn't felt supported in a very long time. When you sit down, your muscles often stay on, as if they're prepared to bolt at any second. Building safety means consciously telling your hips, you can sink into this cushion. The floor is solid. It is not going to give way. This internal architecture is built on the foundation of the senses. Our minds can be transported to 100 different stressful scenarios in a single minute, but our bodies are always, stubbornly, in the present. When we focus on the texture of a soft sweater against our skin, the weight of a heavy blanket, or the warmth of sunlight through a window, we are providing the blueprints for a safe space. We are giving the nervous system evidence that it can trust the current moment. Carl Jung suggested that we find our way when we look inward, and building this architecture is a way of making that inner world a place you actually want to inhabit. It's about transforming your internal landscape from a jagged, rocky cliffside into a quiet, sheltered room. There is a deep, emotional relief in finally allowing yourself to be held by your environment. For so many of us, we have been the ones doing all the holding. We held the family together. We held the job together. We held our own emotions in check, so we wouldn't burden anyone else. We have been the pillars, the walls, and the roof for everyone else's lives. The architecture of safety is the first time you allow yourself to be the guest rather than the structure. It's the moment you stop bracing against the air and realize that for this 1 minute, nothing is required of you. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to fix anyone. You just have to exist in a body that is touching a floor that is steady. Sometimes, building this safety feels like a betrayal of our past. We feel that if we stop being on guard, we are disrespecting the hardships we've endured or leaving ourselves open to new ones. But true safety isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of connection to yourself. It's knowing that you have a home base to return to when the world gets loud again. You are creating a sanctuary within your own ribcage. Every time you choose to take one slow, deliberate step instead of scurrying, you are adding a beam to this new structure. Every time you look at a tree or a piece of art and let your eyes really rest on it for 5 seconds, you are windows to your soul. You are teaching your nervous system that it is allowed to enjoy the view. This is how we heal. not by waiting for the storm to pass, but by building a house that can weather it. It's a quiet, private work of art. It's the most important thing you will ever build. A version of you that knows, deep in its marrow, that it is allowed to feel secure. You are creating a space where your breath can finally expand, where your heart can find its natural rhythm, and where you can finally lay your head down and know that you are, at last, safe. Our culture rewards the hustle, the constant movement, and the grind. But for a dysregulated nervous system, fast feels like a threat. There is a deep, quiet courage in choosing to be slow. It might mean taking 5 minutes to drink a cup of tea without looking at your phone, or walking to your car at half your usual speed. When we slow down, we send a direct message to our brain. We aren't running from anything. It's an act of rebellion against the pressure to always be on. Jung said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Looking into your heart requires a stillness that speed simply won't allow. Think about the way we usually move through our lives. We are constantly leaning into the next second, the next task, the next obligation. We eat while standing up, we listen while checking our notifications, and we drive as if every red light is a personal insult. This chronic rushing is more than just a busy schedule. It is a survival state. When your nervous system is stuck in high gear, slow feels dangerous. To your body, slowing down feels like being a target. It feels like if you stop moving, the things you've been running from, the grief, the memories, the exhaustion, will finally catch up to you. That is why being slow requires such immense courage. It is the bravery required to face the silence. When you stop the frantic movement, the internal noise often gets louder at first. You start to feel the actual weight of your fatigue. You start to notice the sadness you've been outrunning. But it is only in this deceleration that we can actually begin to heal. You cannot repair a car while it is going 80 miles an hour down a highway. And you cannot repair a nervous system while it is locked in a permanent sprint. By choosing to be slow, you are making a radical claim on your own life. You are saying that your peace is more important than your productivity. Consider the simple act of washing your hands. Usually, it's a 3-second blur. But what if it took 30 seconds? What if you actually felt the temperature of the water, the texture of the soap, and the sensation of your skin meeting your skin? In those extra seconds, you aren't just cleaning your hands. You are anchoring your soul. You are proving to your biology that there is no immediate crisis. You are giving your security team a break. This isn't laziness. It is a sophisticated form of medicine. It is the antidote to the vibration that keeps us feeling fractured. There is a grief that comes with slowing down, too. We realize how much of our lives we've missed because we were moving too fast to see them. We realize how many moments of connection we traded for a sense of getting things done. But as we embrace the slow, we also find the beauty we've been craving. We notice the way the light hits the floor in the afternoon. We hear the actual timbre of a loved one's voice. We start to inhabit our bodies again, rather than just using them as vehicles to get from one chore to the next. Carl Jung's reminder to look into our own hearts is a call to intimacy with ourselves. And intimacy cannot be rushed. You cannot get to know the deepest parts of your being through a drive-by shooting of self-reflection. You have to linger. You have to be willing to sit on the porch of your own mind and just watch the world go by for a while. This slowness is where the stuck energy finally begins to thaw. It's where the armor starts to feel unnecessary. Choosing to be slow in a fast world will make you feel like an outsider at first. You might feel guilty for not doing enough. But remember that your primary job in this life is to be a whole, integrated human being, not a machine. Every time you choose to take a slow breath, to walk instead of run, or to sit in silence for 1 minute before starting your day, you are reclaiming your humanity. You are building a life that is measured by its depth, not just its speed. You are finally giving yourself the time you need to catch up with yourself. As we start to heal, we begin to realize that we aren't broken. We are integrated. The parts of you that are anxious, the parts that are tired, and the parts that are trying to heal are all on the same side. We stop seeing our stress as an enemy and start seeing it as a misunderstood protector. This integration is where true resilience lives. It's not about never feeling stressed again. It's about knowing that when the stress comes, you have the tools to navigate back to yourself. You start to trust that you can handle the waves because you finally understand how the tide works. For a long time, you might have felt like a house divided against itself. There was the you who wanted to be happy and productive, and then there was the other you, the one who felt heavy, panicky, or distant. We spend so much energy trying to lock that second version of ourselves in a basement. We feel ashamed of our triggers and frustrated by our sudden drops in energy. But integration is about realizing that there is no other you. Every reaction, every bout of tears, and every moment of protective numbness was a survival strategy born out of necessity. You aren't a collection of flaws. You are a masterpiece of adaptation. Think about the parts of your personality that you've tried to hide because they felt too much. Maybe you've tried to silence the part of you that is hypervigilant in social settings, or the part that needs to withdraw for days after a busy week. When we look at these through the lens of integration, we see that these aren't bugs in the system. They are features. The vigilance was trying to keep you safe from rejection. The withdrawal was trying to give your exhausted nerves a chance to recover. When we stop fighting these parts, they stop being so loud. They finally feel heard, and they can begin to settle into the background where they belong. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This journey toward becoming who you are isn't about adding new qualities or fixing your personality. It is about a homecoming. It is about gathering up all the scattered pieces of yourself, the scared child, the overworked adult, the silent observer, and bringing them to the same table. It is the moment you stop saying, "I shouldn't feel this way," and start saying, "It makes sense that I feel this way." That shift is the most profound healing there is. It is the end of the civil war inside your own mind. Imagine what it would feel like to no longer be at odds with your own heartbeat. Imagine the peace of knowing that if a wave of anxiety hits, you don't have to panic about the panic. You can simply say, "Ah, my protector is back. Something feels unsafe right now. Let's look at that together." This is what it means to be an integrated self. You become a steady container for all of your experiences. You are no longer a victim of your nervous system. You are its partner. You move through the world with a new kind of solidity, a quiet confidence that doesn't depend on everything being perfect, but on your ability to be present with yourself no matter what happens. This integration brings a deep emotional softening. You start to have more compassion for others because you finally have it for yourself. You realize that everyone is carrying their own silent library, their own invisible alarm system, and their own heavy armor. You stop judging the struggle and start honoring the survival. This is the living shape of life that Jung spoke of, a life that is whole, complex, and beautiful, because it includes everything. You aren't just the light. You are the shadow that gives the light its depth. You aren't just the calm. You are the strength that was forged in the storm. By bringing all these parts together, you finally become a whole person, standing on your own 2 feet, ready to meet the world with an open, integrated heart. Healing the nervous system isn't a destination with a finish line and a trophy. It's a quiet return. It's that moment when you realize you haven't clenched your teeth in an hour. It's the first time in a long time you take a breath that goes all the way down to your belly. It's a gradual softening. You begin to occupy your own life again, rather than just surviving it. You realize that you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be at peace. And you are allowed to let go of the weights you've been carrying for years. The hum finally starts to fade, and in its place, you find yourself steady, grounded, and finally home. There is a specific kind of beauty in a return that doesn't make a sound. For years, your life might have been defined by the loudness of survival, the screaming sirens of anxiety, the heavy thud of exhaustion, the sharp cracks of sudden anger. You got used to the noise. You forgot what it felt like to exist in a body that wasn't a battlefield. But the return is different. It doesn't arrive with a fanfare or a sudden flash of light. Instead, it arrives in the way you notice the smell of rain before you notice the inconvenience of it. It arrives in the way you can sit in a room alone and not feel the desperate urge to be somewhere else, doing something more. Think about the first time you wake up, and your first thought isn't a checklist of things to worry about. You just wake up. You feel the cool air on your face and the weight of the blankets on your toes, and for a few precious seconds, There is just being. This is the quiet return. It is the reclamation of your own senses. You start to taste your food again, rather than just fueling your body for the next fight. You start to hear the music in a conversation, rather than just listening for the subtext of a threat. You are coming back to the land of the living, stepping out of the gray, hazy fog of dissociation and into the vibrant, textured reality of the now. This return is often bittersweet. As the hum of the stress fades, you might feel a sudden surge of grief for the person you were while you were struggling. You might look back at that version of yourself, the one who couldn't sleep, the one who was always on edge, the one who felt so alone, and feel a deep desire to give them a hug. This is part of the homecoming. You are finally safe enough to mourn the time you lost to survival. Carl Jung beautifully noted, the sun, which at first represents a creative power, eventually becomes its own destroyer. We see this in our own lives. The very survival mechanisms that kept us alive can eventually start to destroy our quality of life if we don't learn to let them go. The quiet return is the moment you stop the destruction and start the creation. You begin to notice that your reactions have changed. When someone cuts you off in traffic, or a plan falls through at the last minute, you still feel it, but it doesn't shatter you. The invisible alarm might chirp, but it doesn't blare. You find that you have a buffer now, a space between the event and your response. In that space, you find your freedom. You realize that you are no longer a puppet of your past experiences. You are the author of your current ones. You are no longer just a living shape of life that has been molded by trauma. You are a shape that is choosing its own form. The quiet return is a series of small, ordinary miracles. It's the ability to look in the mirror and see a friend instead of a project. It's the ability to laugh until your stomach hurts without worrying about when the joy will be taken away. It is the deep, profound relief of finally being able to set down the heavy suitcase you've been carrying since you were a child. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be healed in some clinical, finished sense. You just have to be here. The hum is gone. The static has settled. The armor is on the floor. You are standing in the quiet, and for the first time in a long time, the quiet is a beautiful place to be. You are home.